Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On today's episode, Garry beat Pratis. So what's Garry's status? Poirier has an opponent. We'll talk about it in a moment. And don't worry, before we leave you, we'll be doing a UFC Iowa preview. What's up with that? All right. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. And look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Check out Dan Tom, the Flying Hawaiian in Las Vegas. He's our fight analyst. He loves to gamble. He loves to fight. You should pay attention to him. Danny Segura down in Miami, an excellent reporter. And by the way, if you love consuming MMA in Espanol, check out Hablemos MMA. And Nolan King, the Boston shot caller, another talented reporter. He was part of the World MMA Awards nominees. So shout out to him. Looking good as always. Maybe it's because I don't want him to give me shit about the Lakers. Cold Coffee's on the ones and twos. Let's get started, guys. Ian Machado Garry narrowly escaped with a decision victory over Carlos Pratis. Narrowly, you may ask. What? Narrowly? Let me explain. On the scorecards, he was the clear winner. But prior to this fight reaching 25 minutes, Pratis was putting it on Garry in round 5, almost stopping him via TKO. So let's unpack this main event. Danny Segura kicked things off. What were your thoughts, and what did we learn in the Pratis and Garry fight?
Well, it was an amazing fight. Shouts out to Ian Garry for taking that fight on short notice because it was a dangerous one, and he came out on top. Not only that, but he looked great. It was a great fight. I think this was sort of a win-win situation for the welterweight division because I don't think Pratis, especially with how he ended the fight, loses too much stock. He's still very much a fan favorite fighter. People want to see him fight. People still considering him dangerous. And same with Garry. I mean, I think both their stocks in a way went up. Obviously more with Ian Garry with the victory. But all in all, I thought it was a great result for this welterweight division that has been looking amazing as of recently, and just so many contenders coming up, so many fun matchups coming up as well. Welterweight division right now, in my opinion, is the best division in the UFC.
It's popping, and that's without the rumored Islam Makhachev move up. What were your thoughts, Nolan King, on this main event? Nolan, we are on mute.
I know Ian Garry's a polarizing figure, but for me, it's time to put some respect on his name, right? You can like him, you can hate him, but the guy puts his money where his mouth is. He steps up. He's fighting Shavkat and Carlos Pratis back-to-back on short notice. And sure, maybe it wasn't, the most exciting performance or whatever, but for me, like, it was super technical. It was smart, and he did exactly what he needed to do to get pretty decisive win over a guy that's got some serious power and has been putting people down. So, you can like him, you can hate him for whatever reason, but I think you have to respect his skills at this point. And the last couple fights, even the Shavkat fight, which he lost, I felt like he showed different areas of his game that we hadn't seen yet. And he is an elite fighter in this division, and he set himself up, obviously, to be in the UFC's good graces. We were hearing that with him being a backup fighter in Montreal. So a big win for Ian Garry. He took the risk. It paid off, and you got to respect him for it. I think it's time to at least give him his due in terms of his abilities.
All right. And Dan, you got to see 25 minutes of Carlos Pratis. Imagine this guy without cigarettes and maybe throwing more than 5 punches around. He'd be a killer.
Yeah, I don't know. So much the cigarettes as far as like the Thailand fighting style, I think is what kind of bit him in the butt here. He kind of took off those first 3 rounds. But to your point, George, I'm glad you put that caveat in there. He did get a lot of work done in rounds 4, which one judge somehow didn't give to him, and round 5, which arguably should have been a 10-8, both with the way the criteria is written, how it's currently applied, and let's be honest, how it should be applied given the range and latitude of a 10-9 round. This reminded me of kind of a random fight here, but Andre Sukumtath versus Alex Turbo Perez back in Mexico, where Sukumtath dropped him and rocked Perez multiple times, had Perez literally fear in his eyes, crawling back away. And I was just like, what more do you have to do? And somehow Sukumtath lost that fight somehow. What more do you have to do to get a 10-8? And if it's not a back and forth war, folks, and a fighter is getting rocked and dropped multiple times and literally crawling away for their life, like a horror movie, when the alien is tearing up the room and one of the doctors is almost away and they grab him back in. That's what Ian Garry looked like. How is that not a 10-8? As a judge, you have to ask yourself, did the fighter earn his 9? Did Ian Garry get a close submission attempt? Did he get a lot of volume in that round? Did he rock Pratis? Well, the answer is no, he did not earn his 9. So it probably should have been a draw. That being said, like Nolan said, you got to give credit to Garry, man. Dude is 4-0 against Southpaws right now. I know I picked against him this weekend, but I still stand by, and I guess it was proven true that he does strike better with Southpaws and Orthodox fighters, and the guy is really talented, so you got to give him his credit. I'm not here to be Irish. I'm here to be Brazilian. Sorry, I had to give that out to the Garry impression.
That was good, man. And that crawl away, I was thinking so many things at that time, but the crawl away and grabbing for the leg, like, oh my gosh, I thought I was watching a movie on Lifetime. But I don't want to go down that road. Dan, I'm going to stay with you here, man. All right, for Garry, check this out. He's the backup at 315. He's spoken in the universe, and Dana White confirmed it, man. You like that?
I don't know if it matters if I like it. My question is, does his right arm like it? Because boy, did that thing look broken in the fight. It looks swollen. Who knows what these fighters are coming in with? Ian Garry already took this fight on an impromptu camp, just like his last fight, just like half the UFC main event bookings now. I mean, I'm a writer, guys. It's always rematch or impromptu or semi-impromptu. Those are my most used words if I were to plug in my Grammarly right now. What words do I put in the most? Like, well, you cover the UFC, Dan. It's rematch and impromptu fights. So you guys know my feelings about impromptu fights. It already leaves the X factor door open for injuries. Are these guys sick or not? We have those questions on later in the card with another fighter, right? We only increase that variable more. So do I like it? No. Do I have a problem with it? No.
They say you take a week off to recover, and then the last week is really about the weight. So that leaves them with no time to not necessarily improve, but just get back to where you were before the practice fight started. This one's an important one, Dan. I want to get your opinion too. Do you like this call? Like, okay, let's just say Ian Garry did the studies, and he said, well, 99 out of 100 times, they don't need me, and I'm just going to show up and get a check and get a front row seat. Okay, maybe he's doing that. But from the UFC's end, would they want to shove this guy in there if they were in that type of pickle when they got like a Sean Brady or maybe just another guy that's not messed up from a fight that just happened 48 hours ago?
Well, I don't think the UFC cares all that much, like in sort of what condition Ian Garry
like a wheelbarrow. They just shove the bodies out there,
healthy, and he can get in there and save their pay-per-view should an injury or something happened, right? I think at that point they just need a body. And Ian Garry just happens to be a top contender and a big name in the division. So I think it'd be a fantastic replacement for them. But I don't think this is smart from Ian Garry. I know that sometimes being the backup gets you the next title shot, right? We've seen it with Colby. We obviously did not see it with Pavlovich. But more or less, I mean, it does get you in the good graces of the UFC, and it does give you a little bit more leverage. And in this division where you get so many guys like, Sean Brady, Shavkat, who knows what's going to happen between Buckley and Usman. You get so many guys angling for that title shot that any little edge can really help you make the difference. I get where Gary's coming from, but like Dan pointed out, man, that was a grueling fight. Like, it was 25 minutes. Those last 2 rounds, he got hurt pretty bad. He was in a short notice camp, and all of a sudden, this welterweight title is getting disputed on May 10th, and you want to be the backup for that. Another weight cut and get a title shot under those circumstances. Should he get it? I don't think it's smart money, but I also don't think it's smart money to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov on short notice. I also don't think it's smart money to fight Carlos Praches on 5 rounds on short notice, and yet he did. And in a way, even though he went one-on-one, came out a victor in all those situations, at least on the grand scheme of things. So you do got to give it to Garry. The dude gets a lot of hate, but he's got balls, man. That guy has balls, and he's a good fighter, and you got to give it to him. If you were to imagine beat Praches on short notice and then like a couple weeks later come back and like win the UFC welterweight title, my God, I mean, that'd be an insane thing to do.
It would be, but I would rather roll out a 43-year-old GSP who's supposed to corner someone that weekend than have Ian Garry out there.
I'm with you. I'm just
like these fighters are assets to the company. Tell the guy, hey, look, you've done some good work. Go relax for a bit, and then we'll figure out a good spot for you. But Nolan, do you disagree, or what are your thoughts here?
No, I mean, if you were to tell me that Garry would beat Prats and then the UFC would put him in this position, not knowing how the fight went down and how he was physically, I would be, okay. Like it all comes down to logistics, right? So logistically, this doesn't make sense though, seeing him after the fight. I mean, the internal and external damage and having to turn around and, having to cut weight twice in 2 weeks too, on top of that is probably difficult. But
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't hate on him. I respect him for taking it, and the UFC, rewarding a fighter that stepped up. I do understand to a certain degree, but again, logistically, I don't think it makes sense for a guy that seems to be banged up to have to go through that again. And I mean, this fight, he'll have to be on the scale in, what is it, like 11 days or something again. So I don't know if will be enough time for all that to kind of not be bugging him.
Yeah. In the chat room, Quebec Sucks says Garry will be champ soon. Love it. Dan, you had your hand up. You wanted to weigh in again?
I just wanted to say, how funny would it be if, something did happen with all the shuffle ups and Garry ends up getting a title shot before Shavkat, right? How crazy would that be? A, and B, we were just, giving crap about like Volkanovski, a pound for pound great, fighting for a title off a loss. Like, not only could, Garry, if you think about it, not to play this game because he deserves credit, but he's kind of like 0-3 right now because just like similar to Josh, no disrespect to Josh Emmett, but Josh Emmett, Dan Ige, a fight where you go back and you go, Dan Ige actually won that fight, especially if you know what you're watching and scoring. And similar to Ian Garry versus Michael Venom Page, like Michael Venom Page arguably won that fight. It was a close split decision. He loses to Shavkat. He arguably should have got a draw here, which is not a win, not a loss, but not a win. So he kind of could technically be like winless in his last 3 fights and still get a title shot here, guys.
Dan, wax on this a little bit. Steve Williams says Pratos won about 2 minutes of that fight. Sadly, Garry was dominant. So he seems to be in disagreement with what you're saying. And I think what you're alluding to is you're saying it was a draw, not necessarily a Pratos win, right?
Yeah, I think the argument there is for a draw. I honestly feel like I'm not sure what's a better argument, scoring round 4 for Garry or giving a 10-9 to Garry, but I kind of disagree with both of those. I do feel like the more impactful strikes, the fighting momentum was shifting to Pratos' side. I'm open to rewatching that one. However, I am much more firm that he won much more than 2 minutes of that fight because he won much more than 2 minutes of round 5. So much so that I'm going to stand my ground and say that should have been a 10-8. That being said, Ian Garry got the win, man. So if you're an Ian Garry fan, you shouldn't be upset about it at all.
Mm-hmm. That's what you get on this show. If you have a quality comment or question, we'll get to it right away. Yeah, I know. I like on that sometimes in other weeks, but I'm trying to be real good about it this week. And we'll trade that in for your like. If you hit a like, the thumbs up on this show, I will gladly appreciate it. And I'll try and bring more of those into the show. Danny Segura, what's next for Pratos? We learned a lot. Again, he can go 25. He can close strong, but he also, his output just wasn't where it needed to be.
Yeah, and you can tell he was upset. I think there was a little interaction between him and Ian Garry right at when the fight finished, where he kind of just goes like he knew he messed up. He knew that if he would have upped the intensity in earlier rounds, he maybe could have gotten a finish or even won the fight on points. Because when the fight ended, it didn't look like he was gassed or he was tired. It looked like he could have fought maybe 5 out of 10 more minutes. So, not a great look from Pratos on that end. But I still think, like I mentioned in my earlier point, that his stock is still very high. This is a guy that people want to watch fight, and clearly still has a label of being very, very dangerous. So I think there are a lot of good fights for him out there in the division. I think just wait and see what happens between Jack and Belal. I think if Jack were to lose, that fight would be amazing. Very good striking battle between the two. Fight between him and Michael Page is also one that excites me. There are names out there for him. Him and Jeff Neal. They're good fights.
It's almost like Garry hung his hat on the Shavkat rack, right? By losing to him, but making it close. I think Pratos could do the same with Garry. So as Gary's succeeding, Pratos can say, I was right there. So you're right. Keep fighting them big names at this point. In a loss, his stock did not drop much. All right, another big thing happened on Saturday. Anthony Smith retired from the sport of mixed martial arts. This is a guy who's fought, who now works as an analyst on the desk there for the UFC, who's hosted a show on SiriusXM back when we were, on our run of SiriusXM as well. He was a colleague there. Good guy, fought at middleweight, fought at light heavyweight, once fought for the title. Could have just said, hey, I can't go, and he would have actually beat John Jones, and he didn't. And I'm sure you guys saw that in the highlight video. But Nolan, what were your thoughts on Anthony Smith's final hurrah?
Yeah, it was time. I think he's somebody that over the span of his career seemed to have 9 lives, right? There would be performances that he'd go in there and we'd see him get beat up pretty badly, and with the Glover fight a few years ago, I remember, and then he had a nice little run after I think he had like maybe 3 or 4 losses in a row. Had a nice run, resurgence. He was back. He was kind of finishing some middle of the pack guys, some lower ranked guys, and then kind of took a step up again and had some losses and rebounded and lost and won. So he's somebody that, I think over the span of his career, fought a who's who at light heavyweight. Somebody that I think we'll see on the desk more going forward, even though he's retiring. I think he's a face we'll still see on the broadcast. So good for him for setting himself up for post-fighting. But I have no doubt that this was the right move. I think, after that last fight, granted, he had a lot of personal issues going into the Reyes fight. And when he was in there, he looked like a shell of himself, of the prime Anthony Smith. I think giving him this opportunity to go into a fight where he's announced that it was a retirement fight, I always appreciate that, guys, declaring that and then the UFC giving them that opportunity. So kind of unfortunate to see him lose and to get, finished again with strikes. You never like to see that, but quite a long career, lots of fights, fought at the top level, fought John Jones. Like you said, could have said that he couldn't go and he would be champ. So I think he'll always go down in the history books as making one of the most respectable moves in title fight history, but definitely time to hang him up. And I'm glad that the UFC gave him his little moment there afterwards.
Danny, quick thoughts on Lionheart?
Yeah, I'm with Nolan. Pretty much copy and paste. Great career. I mean, the guy did a lot, got pretty far, fought for a UFC title. A lot of people also see that sometimes as failures, like, oh, you lost in a UFC title, right? You didn't become champion. But how many fighters try to just make it to the UFC? How many fighters just try to linger inside of the UFC for a year, getting the rankings, much less win a title opportunity like Anthony Smith did? So even in defeat, I think it's still very commendable that he got that far. And yeah, I think it's time. We were just looking at some highlights there, and it's just night and day. The fighter that we've seen in the last couple of years compared to the fighter that was picking up those decisive victories. And look, he's got a super bright career as a broadcaster. Clearly, people like him a lot over there. He also does some things on the side in media. So, it kind of just, I kind of wish that this kind of came sooner. Maybe he could have saved himself, a few more shots and stuff like that. But anyways, great career. And yeah, all the best to Anthony Smith. Great guy.
Dan, you've seen quite a few career exits. Sometimes it's them just not getting re-signed, or they retire on social media, or they didn't know, that these headaches would be ongoing. There's so many things that we've seen over time. This guy kind of went out on his own terms.
Yeah.
Did you like that type of exit, Dan? And would you like to see more fighters maybe just make that announcement, and maybe it'll help them come to terms with the end of their career?
I want to say yes, but there's always that joke, hashtag MMA retirements. That being said, I don't feel like this is one of them. I think regardless of anyone's feelings on Anthony Smith or his career, I think we can all agree this felt like a real retirement, as it should be with the way the UFC rolled out for them, right? Which, I saw people criticizing that. And again, I want to remind people, like, hate the game and not the player. So, nobody talks more crap about the heavier divisions than I do, if you read my work or listen to me, right? But if you listen, I'm also like, I at least I do my best to give these fighters the respect that they deserve. My criticisms are not toward the fighters, it's toward the UFC and the weight they put in these, heavier weight classes. But as far as the Anthony Smith goes, like, Danny Segura said it great. Like, dude, this guy's an overachiever, right? Like, it's so weird how we decide to hate on people, like, in this sport. There are some people that you can hate on, believe me. Like, there are some, people that, you could make a good case to hate on, let's just say, and leave it at that. All right, Mitchell. But like, we're going to waste it and hating on a guy like Anthony Smith. It just makes no sense. Like, you don't have to like the guy. You don't have to like his style. You don't have to like his fights. You don't have to like the UFC's decisions to headline him. But the dude was such a nice guy. I know George and you guys have had plenty of interactions with him. Never had a bad interaction with him. Of course, I'm biased. The first UFC fighter to shout out my podcast, Protecting That Podcast. Thank you, nice. Anthony. But I've done shows with him. Did a show with him just the other week. Dude, couldn't be more salt of the earth, dude. A family guy. Been through a lot of crap in his life. I don't know. I root for those people. I become fans of those people, but the way UFC fans are, whether you're old, you're losing, or whatever, and Anthony Smith unfortunately checked those boxes, they treat you like trash. They treat you like a commodity, and I think that's wrong. So props to the UFC for giving Anthony Smith credit. And yeah, we wish they would do that for every fighter, but like Terrence McKinney tweeted, not every fighter wants that treatment either. So props to them, props to Smith. wish him nothing but the best.
Good stuff there. All right. Real quick thoughts on Zhang Mingyang and his potential, Danny Segura.
Man, I liked what I saw. His striking was good. His power was there. His finishing instinct and ability was there. This light heavyweight division needs names, and hopefully he can put together some impressive victories, because right now the landscape is looking not great at 205. But this is maybe just a small glimmer of hope that maybe we can spice up the division a little bit.
He gets after it too, man. He's a round one killer. And he's speaking in English, communicating. I love it, man. I'm down with that dude. Nolan, how about you on Onama? What were your thoughts there, and what's his potential, David Onama?
Yeah, big win for him, man. At home, Giga's is no easy out. So to go in there and be able to win over Giga is a great win. Somebody that I feel like Onama was thrown into the fire pretty early in his UFC career too, right? Like there was that card out in San Diego where him and Nate Landwehr, I kind of forget exactly the circumstances, but they ended up being pretty high up, I think, as the co-main event, and put on an absolute barn burner. So I feel like, he's turned some heads. He's got respect to the UFC, and now he has that win on his resume to say, hey, like, I'm not just a rising guy. I'm not just somebody that can have fun fights or has some potential. Like, nope, I have something to show for it now. So I'm sure this will set him up for another big matchup going forward. Somebody in the rankings.
Dude, and that Giga's got some clean striking, man. At times he was lighting up Onama. So Onama fought some adversity there. Give me another highlight, Nolan. I'll stay with you from this event in KC.
Yeah, Malcolm Wellmaker, man. I was impressed by him. I think he's coming out of Contender Series last year. He kind of had the perfect balance of like excitement, personality, potential, where you're like, okay, this guy, he's established himself in some areas, but like you see room for improvement, right? So I think he's somebody that the UFC can promote. Big knockout of Cameron Simon on Saturday, and the UFC is going to Atlanta in a couple months, which is where I believe he kind of carved his way up the regional ladder, so they can throw him on that card, put him in front of an audience, and give him an opportunity to continue to grow his brand. And I'm sure they will. They love promoting those Contender Series guys. So that's kind of what it seems like a very easy layup sort of plan as to what to do with him next.
Well said about Wellmaker. And yes, I love that he sees the moment. He's already connecting the dots. Augusta, Atlanta, 2 hours. Put me on that card. Dan Tom, give me another highlight from KC.
I'm going to go with Jacqueline Amarim. Excellent submission threat for that division. Strawweight. The women's division is always nice to see some life in there. She got a second round submission, which could have been a first round rear naked choke if Tandan Murgliata, who we see there, didn't prematurely jump in with his weird and awkward. And again, I call it on the show all the time. I always reference Tandan and Mark Smith with kind of that manic energy, and that kind of translates to the way they call their fights. And it also happened with Matt Schnell in round 2, had a deep guillotine. And it was funny. I had a round robin ticket with Anne Marine round 1, and the next leg was Schnell round 2. And I'm like, damn, Tandan, did you see my slip? And are you taking out all my taking it out on me now for my critiques on your reffing style? Oh my God, that was awful. But shouts to Anne Marine though.
All right. How about you, Danny Segura?
2 quick ones. Matt Chanel, dude retired, and I mean, I'm not playing. Well, I am playing a little bit of psychologist here, but it looked like he had some demons. He looked like he had he was frustrated with his career from that retirement. Came back, had a tough fight against Jimmy Flick. Looked like he was gonna lose. Comes back and wins it. I mean, you love to see a nice comeback story. So shouts out to Matt Chanel, and also don't retire, man. There's still a lot of fight left in that guy. And also, I got to go to women's bantamweight. Jocelyn Edwards picking up a TKO win over Chelsea Chandler. Again, similar to my point of 205, women's bantamweight needs names. And this is a fighter that is improving, is from a country that has very little to no representation in MMA. And yeah, let's see how far she can go.
I wanted Edwards to get that bonus. She lit up Chandler like it was Chelsea Handler out there. But yeah. That was a bummer. And I didn't do my homework, man. I wanted my other shout out to be Ming Yang, but then I noticed he was a topic. So I don't know. All I can say is shout out to the
what about Randy Brown? Huh?
The announce table a few times.
Yeah, what about Randy Brown?
I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. And Anthony Smith came in. Look at Karate Ted Tunes kind of crapping on Anthony Smith. He says he came in like a lamb, but he went out like a lamb. He should have retired a long time ago. Joseph Boza says, I agree with Dan Tom. Anthony's one of those retirements I can see that actually retires. Am I wrong to think during the moment that GFL will try to go after him? Man,
Who?
we don't know much about GFL at this point.
What?
So
What is he
who
talking
knows?
about? I don't know what he's talking about. He's
Who
talking
knows
about
about
some
that one?
non-existent MMA promotion that it's imaginative. Is that what he's?
Yeah. Um, Karate Tattoos also says best elbow since Matt Brown. Very quick, covers distance well. Yeah. Steve Williams, Randy Brown versus Nicholas Dalby. My God, he gives an applause there. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Guys, some big names have been signed to fight this summer. Let's talk about these fight bookings. Dan Tom, the ATL has a nice one. Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley. It's pretty fresh, no?
I do like it. You know, I know there's been jokes about Joaquin Buckley raiding retirement homes, and this booking certainly won't help those accusations. But he does have a formidable challenge. I mean, you can't count out Kamaru Usman. I know plenty of people did when he went up to 185 on another impromptu fight against Khamzat Chimaev. But I do like this fight, and it is a good opportunity for Buckley. Buckley definitely deserves it. So, you know, I know it's a young versus old, so to speak, but Buckley's been around too. I think it's a good matchup.
All right. What do you think, Danny Segura? We got the aging vet against the young guy, and I think that's kind of the true test. And sometimes the aging vet will hold court, hold his serve, like they say in tennis.
Yeah. He actually had this fight and made this call out after his win in Tampa, which I was there present for MMA Junkie covering the fight. His win over Colby Covington. And after that, I was like, I absolutely love this fight. This fight has to be made. And accidentally, without knowing, I cut a little promo for Buckley, who made a promo with that voiceover here done at SBC and is now on his social media, all over his social media. By the way, badass promo. But I stand by everything that I said then. I think this guy is a huge threat in the division. I think this guy needs big names, and I do think that a lot of people are underestimating him when they talk about the title picture. And I feel like fans and the MMA world are going to be in sort of a rude awakening come this fight, because I don't see him losing to Kamaru Usman, and I can see him picking up a very devastating and very dominant win. So let's see what happens. It's still MMA. Anything can happen, but I think the world of Joaquin Buckley at 170, and I think this is a great booking. I love it.
Danny, I'm staying with you. If he smashes, does he supersede Ian Garry if they don't need an alternate in Montreal? Because remember, Garry lost to Shafkat, but he's done a nice little way of manipulating us. Like, I'm on this roll still.
That's a tough one. I think he could. We just got to see how it looks. But like, if you're telling me what looks better, like winning a decision over Praches and like almost getting finished in the last round versus running through Kamaru Usman in your hometown, a former champion, I think the other, plus the recency bias, which obviously weighs in on a lot of people, will probably hold more weight. But then again, that is a big if, right? We got to see what happens first. But yeah, that welterweight division, man, you can make a case for everyone. What about Sean Brady, right? What about Shafkat? We're forgetting about him when just a month ago we could swear that nobody could surpass him. All of a sudden, he seems to be a little bit forgotten. So what a great division. These are all good problems to have. You want these kind of problems. These are the problems the UFC light heavyweight, the UFC bantamweight division needs.
And what if a real undefeated fighter like Michael Morales were to do a number on Gilbert Burns?
I'm telling you, it's a great division. It's the best.
We got another player.
I would say that for 135 for a couple of years. That's changed because a lot of big names have faced out. Yes. But this 170 right now, and I expect this to last a good couple of years, is the best division in the UFC, hands down.
All right. Nolan King, man, what are your thoughts on Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley in Atlanta? It's a great sports city, so I'm glad they got a proper main event.
Yeah, good for them. I'm glad the UFC's having this stretch now, right, with Atlanta and Nashville and New Orleans, kind of these places they haven't gone for a long time.
Nolan, you're telling me you don't like the UFC Apex shows?
Well, I'll save that rant for a different day. But it's good to I like this matchup. I think it's cool that Buckley called for it. I do see like Danny said, you see the comments of people complaining about him, or I think Dan Tom said it, of people complaining that Buckley's only fighting older fighters and blah, blah, blah. But like, this was, I think, the right fight kind of for both guys. For Usman, I mean, who did he lose to, right? He lost to Leon, who was the champ. He lost to, or was the top contender. He lost to Leon, who was the champ. And then he lost to Khamzat. So I think, what were you going to give Usman? You're going to give him somebody unranked or somebody 15 or 12? Like, no, we're 4 versus 6 here. Buckley, this is his opportunity to go out there and fight and beat potentially the biggest name of his career so far. He's surging. He's doing a great job promoting himself. I think there was some video clips I saw on social media of a video blog that he did where he narrated it with some funny stuff during Kansas City Fight Week. So he's doing great for himself. Now he's got a really recognizable name across the cage where you can draw in maybe and make your name more recognizable to those fans that are more casual. And again, I'm not sure that this will get him to be the next title challenger because this division is so good right now and so healthy. But it certainly puts him right in that conversation if he goes out there, particularly and gets a finish over Usman.
Hey, it's that aging vet that puts over the younger guy, really. And so that's the UFC's way of building the star. And then that young star kind of wants that. So it's just the way it's worked out for Joaquin Buckley. And to be fair, Usman was whooping Edwards before he took the head kick. And then he battled Hamzat in a higher weight class where Hamzat's now reciting.
Yeah. And on short notice.
Having to travel half the world, So not trying to be an Usman cheerleader, but there's many ways of looking at this. All right. I think we've covered that pretty well. Do you want to weigh in on it, Dan, or you want to shift over to Mad Max and Dustin Poirier in New Orleans? As Danny said, the UFC's taking the show on the road, man. Your thoughts? You're on mute.
I love this fight. I love that. I'm glad you shifted gears to that one. This is again, does a trilogy fight count as a rematch? Because it's not a rubber match, right? We're not 1-1. I always get confused with that whenever I have to put my rematch stat on there, guys. That being said, if you wanted to count this as a rematch, it's not one I would slap the wrist of the UFC matchmakers for. This is a solid fight. I love the veterans fight, and I hate to be lumping Holloway in with the veterans and even Poirier, because I've been watching him forever. But this is the appropriate fight to make. Hometown fight for Dustin. And if Holloway does play spoiler, hey, he'll still be down in the series. And who doesn't love Max Holloway? So I don't see how that one has a sad ending either way. Another kind of fitting ending for a fitting fighter, so to speak.
Danny, he also had thrown out, he being Poirier, he spoke to MMA Junkie. He said, hey, Topuria, that was a name that flashed across his mind when he heard Topuria was moving up. And then the rubber match against Justin Gaethje. But what are your thoughts on what the direction the UFC went in? Because they shut him down on those other two.
It's hard to hate on this fight. This fight's amazing, but I do think it's not 1A. I did wanted to see that trilogy fight with Justin Gaethje. I just like closure on things, and I think they're 1-on-1. It just made sense. They're both older guys finishing up their careers. That fight to me just made way too much sense. However, I think neither guy wanted to fight each other because of the implications that both guys carry when they step in the cage. I think Justin Gaethje, when asked about it, he said, I don't think it's fair for our families, which is completely fair. After that, you kind of just got to back away and be like, okay, on to the next. And I think this is the next appropriate option. I think this is a great fight. Max Holloway is 0-2 against Poirier, but I think a lot has changed since. I don't know if the result will change, but I do expect a highly competitive fight, much more competitive than the first two. And yeah, it's an appropriate BMF fight as well. Like, hard to complain about that, right? Even though maybe we can think it's a little gimmicky, they do fit the bill.
Well, I'm going to complain because does he think that fighting Makhachev is a Swedish massage? That one is not fun either. I would have liked to get a final closure on a fight that's 1-1. But I guess Gaethje probably knew he had a good shot at getting the title, so maybe that's why that was just his way of skirting around it. What are your thoughts, Nolan King, on this matchup? They're going to headline an event in a proper city, a good party city, man. I'm glad the UFC is going back there to New Orleans. Sounds like a fun weekend if you're a fan. Yeah,
I just was there in January, first time ever. Absolute blast. Very cool place. It might be a little warm there in July, but overall, man, this is awesome. This is A+ in my opinion. There's so many logistics when it goes into booking a fight, right? Like this, going to the Smoothie King Center where you're probably going to want, if Dustin Poirier is going to have his retirement fight, it's going to have to be a pay-per-view. So it really limits the amount of opponents you can do, and having the BMF title kind of, again, like Danny said, a little gimmicky, but I think there is an element of this too where we're like, okay, these seeing savages fight each other in fights that don't necessarily make sense. Maybe that's the bridge we need to make it happen. So I thought it was a good opponent. Obviously, shout out to the UFC for doing something outside the box, or something that maybe is a little bit more. We need more cool shit in MMA, right? And giving Dustin Poirier his event to go out in front of his fans where they probably wouldn't go otherwise is cool. So I love it. I checks a lot of boxes for me. I'm sure this will have a handful of the other fighters from that region down in Louisiana as well. You know, Brendan Allen, Kurt Holloway, Matt Schnell, who we saw. There's Macy Chiasson, I believe, is from that area as well. So cool for all those fighters. Cool for the fans down there. Great city, like you said. Feel bad for the UFC staff having to do Nashville and New Orleans back to back. I don't want to be their livers. Not a good day to be a liver. But very, very cool event by the UFC. I'm glad they're putting it on.
When did you go to New Orleans?
I went in January, at the end of January.
So not Mardi Gras, or was it Mardi Gras?
No, it was a few weeks before that. It was like the beginning of Carnival, kind of, but none of that stuff was going on yet.
And it says, random question, where can I get a bunch of beads? Now I'm starting to connect the dots. You're having some fun out there. All right. And by the way, Derek Lewis, originally from New Orleans. I know he plays the Houston card, but you never know.
Yeah.
He's always willing to fight. Danny, you like that it's BMF, you know, that whole thing? And a lot of fighters seem to not care about it, but this is an actual BMF title defense. So I think in the past, Dana White has said points, pay-per-view points come with that because it's a title. So good for Max. I'm not going to hate on it. And then for Dustin, maybe he won't reach undisputed, but if he can have an interim and a BMF, that might be a nice way to exit the sport.
Yeah, I guess. I still don't know how I feel about the BMF belt. Like, the things that you mentioned are great. The fighters getting, you know, a little bit more money. I guess a little bit more legacy because, you know, as you mentioned, if Poirier were to retire, were to win, he'd be leaving with a BMF belt and an interim, which I guess.
Hang on a second, Danny. Stop it. If you beat someone for the BMF title and The Rock's about to put the belt, would you be like, get that thing off me, man? I don't know how I feel about this thing.
But at the same time, it's like, what is it? I mean,
wouldn't you?
Holloway got knocked out by Topuria in his last fight. Who's the BMF, right? Like,
I don't know. A whole other weight class.
It's just such a vague. It's just such a vague thing. Like BMF. Like what exactly does that mean, right? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Part of me thinks it waters down the sport a little bit. I don't know. I don't 100% love it, but I'm not here to hate on it all too much.
All right.
I
think it's two BMFs walking into the cage. I'll take it.
Sure.
Hey, quick thoughts on Bahamondes and Fiziev. It's official. They're going to Baku, Azerbaijan. Nolan King. What does this mean for that division? Fiziev's, his stock hasn't dropped much, even though he's in a skid too. And Bahamondes is a rising star.
Yeah, I kind of almost wish this was the main event, right? That would be scenes with Fiziev being one of the few from Azerbaijan. So that would have been cool. Particularly where there's light heavyweights above it. I always feel like we're going to get robbed of some. We'll be sitting at the end of this fight, right? The third round will sound and we'll be like, oh, we wish we had 2 more rounds. And then Hill and Roundtree will have like a 7-minute fight where somebody gets knocked out and we won't need those 5 rounds. But anyways, can't complain. This card is looking very interesting, right? It's got Horiguchi on there as well. This is a great complementing fight. Pretty high stakes for both guys too. I mean, Fiziev doesn't want to have to lose at home, particularly coming off a loss. And then for Bahamondes, this is a huge moment for him. I mean, he's looked great. I think people are all on board the Bahamondes train. And so will it leave the station in Azerbaijan? I'm not sure. But this is a good booking by the UFC. I'm a big fan of this one.
Shout out to the UFC, whoever makes their posters. They must have used that little stoop that Megan O'Leary has for the taller fighters. Because did you see Bahamondes and Fiziev? They're like the even height poster. That's definitely not the case, man. That's for sure. But I like the creativity there. I do like it. By the way, I don't know if you guys heard, but former Manchester United legend Patrice Evra has signed a fight for PFL Europe in May. He's 43 years of age. Of course, he's an athlete. He played high-level football. But, man, I have not seen this go well for other fighters. And then this late in his career, I do not want to see a Red Devil get stomped. So hopefully they're kind. We'll give him CM Punk or someone. But, yeah, I was happy but not happy when this happened. That story's on Junkie if you want to check it out. We have to move on, though. Des Moines. It takes place on Saturday. They're back in Iowa. Iowa used to house a lot of great fighters, including the Militich fighting system back 25 years ago. So nice for them to hit that zone back. The Midwest has been popping for the UFC as of late. The Central Time Zone. Let's see. They put together some nice scraps here. Nolan King what are your thoughts on these bantamweights that are colliding in the main event? Sorry, Corey Sandhagen against Davison Figueiredo. What's the meaning at 135 for each of these cats?
Yeah, 135 is in an interesting spot, right? I think we all have a lot of respect for this division, and it's one of the ones that when you see the top tier talent fight, kind of no matter who it is, you're excited for it. There's intriguing matchups, but things need to get churning a little bit more. We need to have some contenders emerge. People get on a roll. Like even both these guys, right? Both coming off losses. They need a little bit of momentum. They need to be, when you look at the lay of the land, you need to be able to say, okay, this guy has a couple wins in a row, like he should be next. So I guess this maybe gets each of those guys back on the wagon. It gives us the opportunity to see a really high level 5-round fight. I actually think this card, when it first was announced, we were like, oh, it's kind of a bit random. Des Moines, they haven't been there forever. We weren't really sure what kind of card they were going to bring. I actually really like this card. I think if most fight nights that were on the road were like this, I think we wouldn't really complain that much, because there are meaningful fights. We have Bo Nickel, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But love this fight. Love 135. Good 5-round main event in front of a crowd. I can't hate on it, man. I'm a big fan of it.
Dan, I know you haven't sunk in yet to your deep analysis of the fight, but just talk a little bit about each fighter and what are the exciting attributes of both Sandhagen and Figueiredo.
I mean, this is what we were asking for. I mean, Nolan's speaking from my heart when he's talking about the lighter divisions. Again, it's not nothing against the bigger divisions. It's like, these are the fights that deserve the 5-round showcase, right? Like, could you imagine how criminal it would be if Sandhagen and Figueiredo was only 3 rounds, right? Or if they did that to Jan and Figueiredo, the fight I was begging for over half a decade, and that delivered and was arguably the best fight of the year. UFC matchmakers, maybe I know what I'm talking about. But hey, just shove middleweights down our throat, right? But no, they're not doing that this time. And part and parcel is maybe because they're going in front of a live crowd, although I want to say they were in front of a live crowd in Missouri. And guys, even me, who's like the lighter weight flag bearer, I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a card where it was good, where they buried all the lighter weights on the prelims. Like, I kind of get it. I'm not going to give the matchmakers too much crap. And surprise, surprise, guys, even when low expectation lighter weight fight classes, they still over-delivered. Knockout finishes, killing the main card. Maybe that's why I'm talking this crap. I don't know. Maybe there's a reason, guys. But yes, they're doing it right this time. They're even bringing back, I don't want to step on it, but Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens. Bring back my Mike Goldberg name. I'm like, dude, we should just have like a Mike Goldberg Midwest card. Drew McFedries, get Josh Neer. Bump Anthony Smith's timeline back. Just have a full Midwest card, baby. Let's go.
The dentist. Good call. Drew McFedries. Yeah, hard-hitting middleweight. I like it.
Let's go Midwest MMA.
Talking about this main event, what's the road back to the title for the winner? I mean, these guys have lost some key fights, but they're highly valued and appreciated by the fans. So, sometimes they can pick up some steam and some momentum once they bounce back from, those types of hardships and get on a positive run.
Yeah. Am I tripping, guys? And I'll allow the chat to weigh in if you guys want, but I just feel like both these guys are completely out of the race. And it sounds crazy because they are top 5 guys. One of them's a former champion. They are fighting in a main event. It feels like there's a lot at stake here. And it feels like, a big win here could definitely get them closer. But I don't know. I just get a feeling when I just look at sort of the landscape and in my head, I analyze who are sort of the big players. I no longer put Corey Sandhagen in there and Davison Figueiredo. I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but what do you guys think?
All right.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say, I think with Sandhagen, something that I hear a lot from different teams and fighters is like, he's kind of the guy that I think still provides the most sort of difficulties matchup and style wise for a lot of these guys.
But
so I think he's
some fighters. I'm sorry to interrupt. No, I'm not saying they're washed or anything. I just, I don't know. I just don't see them being champions.
Yeah, I think it would take that's fair. I honestly can't argue with that. I think it would take a certain special, I don't know. It would take a certain route to get there. And I don't necessarily see that being clear either. So I'm not going to disagree.
Two things.
I wanted to disagree with you, but I can't.
Sandhagen's come up short in the big fights, but two things stand to me. He's sitting on that stool. I think it was between 4 and 5, and his corner's telling him, do this, do that, or whatever. And he's like, I'm trying to. Almost like I'm just not. He almost like said to me as a fan, I'm not at his level. And that's Umar Nurmagomedov. And then Dvalishvili months later makes Umar Nurmagomedov like he's not on his level. So then it's hard for me to convince that he would do well against Marab. But that said, you're not supposed to do that, this old A, B, and C thing, because they're different matchups. But it's just sometimes when Sandhagen hasn't performed well, he just, yeah, you're right. It's a difficult sell in your mind to think, oh, he can do this, he can do that. But I've also heard a lot of people break him down as one of the most almost perfect fighters, meaning he doesn't have many weaknesses either. Yeah. Dan Tom, am I crazy or we can't hear you?
No, you're not crazy. He's really rounded out his game with his wrestling, and back takes are a big problem of his. That being said, even though he lost his last fight, he showed it's very tough to get that position on him. Umar had to beat him with the striking, right? But we did see kind of from the outside perspective, I kind of saw a hard ceiling there. And to George's point, the fighter maybe saw a hard ceiling themselves, right? That between round 4 and 5 citation, which was great. And to Danny's point, I would say that I agree. I feel like this fight, unfortunately, we're not going to get the winning streak that Nolan is saying that, which I agree as well, that fighters need in this division. But I do believe that I'm probably leaning towards Sandhagen here. I believe he's favored. I haven't even looked at the odds. I just got done watching some Sandhagen tape and some tape for this fight. And I believe that if he wins or whoever wins, it's going to set up a nice, not number one contenders fight, but a nice contender setup for someone else to kind of, like we talked about, getting the more veteran fighters, getting their credit score a bit, stealing a bit of their name. I think it'll set them up, to set someone else up, if that makes sense. And not to sound disrespectful to Sandhagen or Figueiredo.
Yeah, no, totally. All right, let's move to the co-main event. RDR against Bo Nickel. So obviously, the UFC's highly invested in Bo Nickel, but RDR has come over from one championship making some noise, staying busy. The UFC likes that, and he's willing to go out to the Midwest, where obviously Bo Nickel has a big name because he is a prime time wrestler, and that's a wrestling hotbed. Even though he was a Penn State guy, either way, the Iowa schools just do great. So, Danny Segura, talk about this fight. This one should be fun. These aren't guys that like to really throw hands. Barn burners isn't going to be thrown around, but still, I think a lot of people are going to be on the edge of their seat when they're walking out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is a big fight for the division. This is a big fight for Bo Nickel. This is the fight that, like I'm not the biggest fan of the Ritter. I don't think he's going to be a champion in the UFC or anything like that, but the dude is dangerous. The dude is experienced. This is a tough fight. This is a legit, he's taking one of the 15 best fighters in the world at 185 pounds type of fight. Yeah, I know he's in the rankings, obviously, but sometimes the numbers don't reflect that. But he's legit taking a very difficult fight here. And I feel like the UFC has done a great job with Bo Nickel and sort of bring him up and getting him ready for these big moments. And now he's here. It's sink or swim, right? He's in a co-main event. He's against a former 2 Division 1 champion, whatever. I love this fight. I don't know if it's going to be the most exciting fight. I do have some hope for it because the Ritter, I feel like, always goes for it, win or lose. Like, it's funny. Like, you see him fight and you don't know if he's down on the cards and he's trying to finish or he's like dominated for 5 rounds and he's already clear and winning. But he's always fighting with like sort of an emergency to him. So I don't know. I like this fight. And I'm dying to see or to hear Dan Tom's take because we got a bantamweight main event over a middleweight fight. Jesus, this is Christmas came home early in the Dan Tom house.
All right, we'll get to Dan in a second. I'll let him clean up here. But Nolan, your thoughts, man. Bo Nickel seems to be battling the fans who think he's gotten a lot of hype too soon. And the whole thing about wrestlers ain't got hands, or he ain't got hands, but also the comparisons to Hamza Chimaev. He's got a lot of opponents every time a fight's made.
Yeah. I think I've said this before on the show, but like the criticism, I think, coming out of the Paul Craig fight fans want to see exciting fights. So I'm never going to be one to say, oh, a fight's boring. You can't say anything bad about it. You can say whatever you want. We're supposed to be entertained. I do think that matchup was extremely tricky for a guy that's in his 6th or 7th, whatever it is, 7th pro fight to go in there and have to fight Paul Craig, wrestler versus a guy that can submit you off your back. Like there was sure, he could have gone out there and knocked him out maybe, but there was also a lot of routes to victory that were just not going to be pretty for Bo Nickel. So sure, he was a 13-1 favorite, all that sort of stuff. But to me, I think you got to kind of, you got to go a little easy on him because of what the threats were that Paul Craig presents when he gets in there. This one is also a little bit odd. Like Danny said, I think De Ritter, is kind of almost in the Dreekus category in my brain, where I can't necessarily figure him out. Sometimes I see him doing things and I'm like, and Dan maybe is more in the middleweight psychology than I am, but sometimes he does stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but it works out. So I love this fight. Putting it in Iowa, that's such a passionate wrestling community too. Check there. Showcase co-main event where we're 3 rounds. Check there. So I like the booking. It's intriguing. It's got me thinking a lot, which I think is the whole point. And I think it's a huge jump for Bo Nickel too. Like if he goes out there and wins this, now we're talking in, I don't want to say title eliminator sort of category, but we're within an arm's reach of fighting the best in this division. So love this booking all the way around by the UFC. I'm really interested by it.
Don Vito in the chat says, Bo Nickel, another guy who gets undeserved hype. Steve Williams in the chat says, I really like RDR to stop Bo for sure. His toughest matchup. Scott Christian in the chat says, this is an exciting match. I think Bo wins, but he's actually going to see the levels in the game. Karate Ted Toon says, Dana likes Bo. He's a cash cow for him. All right, Dan Tom, I think RDR is going to win. I know, how's he going to get him down? But man, I've been seeing a lot of non-wrestlers take down wrestlers. I mean, the game evolves. Sometimes it's the timing takedown. Sometimes it's just out, catching someone when they're huffing and puffing, maybe because you're putting too much pressure on them. Is it impossible? It's not impossible for RDR to get Bo Nickel down. I don't think. I mean, he's not going to get 10 of those, but man, he's got a great game, submission game once he gets down there. How do you analyze this fight? Feel free to tell me I'm crazy.
Yeah, I mean, part of me, I still have to dig into the tape, but I can tell you right now that even after I dig in the tape, there's still going to be X factors, like there is with every fight, but especially this fight, that you're going to have to make some educated guesses on. And I don't hate, the person in the chat or your George lean, because I also lean RDR, especially at these odds. I mean, Bo Nickel actually opened at a 2-1 favorite, and public money, it's only the beginning of the week. Public money hasn't got to its full push. They've already pushed him a whole $1 up over north of 3-1 odds, which, even if he wins, I have a hard time, seeing him coming out looking like an over a minus 300 favorite. You got to win pretty dominantly, right? And I don't know if I see that, especially even though it was, to be fair, it was a tough stylistic matchup. I agree with Nolan against Paul Craig, right? That being said, is this one any different? You're getting a guy who's only more taller, more awkward, more better of a striker, more length that translates on the ground, more of a versatile ground game, by the way, a better wrestler, by the way, not so much a better wrestler, but more effective because of that long frame. And he uses those judo style takedowns that not a lot of wrestlers are familiar with. It's more closer to the Sambo region. And you even hear wrestlers like the Ryan Baders of the world complaining when they fight, those Sambo guys, like, the takedowns were a little different. They're step acrosses, right? And you look at, I'm a big GM3 fan. He's one of the best. I mean, he didn't make my top 10 rear naked choke artists in MMA history or UFC history for no reason, right? And RDR was able to finish that guy, right, with just one mistake, because it's not even just the takedown, George. It's the scrambles. And wrestlers, we know, they tend to turtle, tripod and kind of give up their back in scrambles. It's a tale as old as time. It's going to be right there, even in the big cage. I feel like these guys are going to, either get grappling, or it's going to be an odd striking match where you could flip a coin. And if you're going to flip a coin at those odds, I don't know about you guys, but I like the more experienced, more proven underdog.
That's what I'm thinking, and I've still seen Bo Nickel freeze UFC 300. It's a head game at some point as well. Even he was his biggest critic after that fight against Brundage. The guys are talking about it. Lazy Bed saying, remember, he couldn't finish Cody Brundage. Pepper Ridge Farms remembers. Good stuff there from you guys. Give me another highlight from this fight card, and feel free to throw in the return of Jeremy Stevens, who went over to PFL. And then he went over to Bare Knuckle and is smashing a Bare Knuckle, makes the call to Hunter Campbell, gets on this card. He's from Iowa. He's on it. Danny, do you like his return? And give me another highlight, too, to keep an eye on from
I love it, and I think the UFC should do more of this. I don't know what his situation is. Maybe Nolan can speak on it. Is it a full-on contract, like 4-fight deal?
I think in interviews he said that it's a one and done sort of thing, but that would be a very unusual protocol for the UFC. Yeah. So I almost wonder if maybe he did sign a multi-fight deal, but they said, if you don't win this, then we might not do another one. That's kind of my hunch as to what it is, if I had to guess.
For whatever it's worth, Gil Canetti, I know the matchmakers really like them from UFC Latin America, and it'll make sense. Iowa, Latin America, just bear with me. I believe he was like on a 1-fight deal type thing. They're like, okay, and he just kept winning. He was already in his 40s. So I love that. I think the UFC should do more of it. Like GG has mentioned in previous episodes, and same with me. I think they should bring back Eddie Alvarez for a trilogy fight against Chandler. Just a one-off. That's it. One-off. You don't have to give him a 4-fight deal. It doesn't have to be like the super expensive, crazy contract that you have to honor now for 3 more fights. No, I think the UFC should do more of this. And it's case-by-case basis. If there's a rivalry, if there's a nice matchup out there. And I think in this scenario, Jeremy Stephens being a veteran, being from the area, I think it adds so much to the card. So I absolutely love it. And just a quick highlight, the return of Miesha Tate. Again, this whole episode, I've been kind of shitting on the women's bantamweight division because it just lacks names. It lacks excitement. I don't think Miesha Tate was going to solve exactly all that, but I don't know. I mean, at 38, women's MMA, Yana Santos, who's a veteran, if she's able to get a win here, maybe that could set her up for a big fight and kind of spice things up again. Again, it's a big name, and hoping that if she still has some of that old Miesha Tate skills that made her a champion, maybe there's still some fun fights for her out there.
We just caught up with her, and you can catch the interview the same place you catch this show weekly here on YouTube. Just go down in the videos section and check out all the content that we offer up. That's why I said it's free, and if you're a hardcore MMA fan, you will dig it. I guarantee you won't be unsubscribing. When you watch those videos, hit the like this one right here that we're on. It's right about to end, but we still have a few minutes. But if you hit the like button, it really helps the algorithm. That's why you hear a lot of YouTubers say that. All right, Nolan King, what's another fight to highlight for you from UFC in Des Moines, Iowa?
I don't know if I could do another fight, but I'll say another fighter. Mason Jones being back in the UFC against Jeremy Stephens. He was a guy that was a little surprising to see the UFC part when he did. I know his record, I think it was like 1-2 and a no contest or something. So it wasn't the greatest on paper, but that dude is a banger. He had a lot of potential. He went back to Cage Warriors and killed it. Looked great. So I love this booking. I can't think of something that, sure, it's not a huge title fight or a contender fight, or when the UFC signed Kayla Harrison out of nowhere. But when they put up that graphic, or whenever the news came out that Jeremy Stephens was back, it was one of the more shocking things. Like, I thought it was a parody account when I saw it, right? But I love that the UFC is doing cool stuff like this, like Danny said. And I don't know if it's maybe Hunter Campbell that's maybe taking the reins a little bit more. That's kind of what I think is he's maybe a little bit more open to it than Dana is, doing kind of this outside the box sort of stuff. We need this. I mean, keep me on my toes. I'm not saying you have to bring back every old fighter, but there are those guys that I think, the Mike Perrys of the world, the Eddie Alvarez of the world, the Jeremy Stephens of the world, when they build themselves up outside, they get some wins in bare knuckle, and then they say, oh, I want to go back to the UFC. I think having that door be open, or at least that conversation, is one to be had. So love this booking. Love that they gave him Mason Jones as well, who has really earned his way back. Let's not forget about that. Really tough fight for Jeremy Stephens on Saturday. I think that we're in for a real banger with this one.
Yeah, and what we're saying is, be picky with it. Don't shove it down our throats. But Eddie Alvarez does deserve that. And if Masvidal wanted to come back, I would have loved to see him in Miami. I honestly would have liked to see Miesha in Seattle, but maybe they weren't ready. But yeah, there are some athletes that I think have earned that. Dan Tom, another highlight from Iowa from you, please.
Great shout on the Mason Jones, by the way. I just wish for the Jeremy Stephens they brought back the Gladiator intro, right? Let's just go full mid-odds MMA, like, I'm going to fight him tonight, right? And then before the matchup, do the Jeremy Stephens. Like, that'd be so cool, like they did with Denver, where they went back to the early 90s. Let's do it. Let's go mid-odds, baby. But I got to shout out Asmat Bokayev on the prelims. He's one of the, by the way, if you're tracking, list always does well, but it's doing really well right now. My prospects to watch column, Asmat Bokayev was on there, won his debut. He's going against Ryan, the Loadmaster Loader. I don't know if that's your nickname, Ryan, but you're welcome to use it, buddy. But I'm going to be looking at that fight. And speaking of my prospects to watch, Kobe Fur got back in the win column this last weekend at Tough Enough, where Kai Kamaka was there and I just got to throw a shout out to Kai Kamaka. Get him back in the UFC. Speaking of people to get back in, I think he's earned his shot. Dude's been on a roll. Only lost to a one fight over in the PFL. Yeah, there's my shout.
Yeah, Kai Kamaka, love that guy. Listen, I'm not the biggest WMMA fan. It has grown on me. There are some phenomenal athletes. There's just not enough of them. So I want to make that clear. There are some that I really, really enjoy watching. But this Jillian Robertson fight against Marina Rodriguez is that true striker versus grappler. Like, Robertson isn't interested in striking. She's a phenom on the ground. They're both going to have to do what they don't like to do, right? And for Rodriguez, it'll probably be survive. I don't think she'll initiate. But if you can't take her down, she's got a nice straight jab. She's got a long, lanky frame, and it can be trouble for you, man, if you can't get that fight to the ground. So this fight's going to have a finish. That's what I like, and I'll be anxious to see if Dan Tom maybe thinks it's an under fight or what. But that's what I do enjoy about this fight. Both of them have been around for a while, so I respect their games. But it'll be interesting to see who can stop who from going down that territory that they're not familiar and as competent in. A couple shout outs here in the chat. Matua says, mute the dude with the Celtics flag. You don't know how bad I want to say that too, but the Celtics are winning and my Lakers are losing, so I'm hands off. I'm hands off, Nolan King, one of the best reporters in the business. Take that back. Scott Christian says, is there a PFL coming up? Phil Davis, isn't that this week too? It is. And let me make note of that. It's on Thursday at ESPN2 and the main card, right? And he's headlining against Rob Wilkinson, two former UFC vets, but two guys that have done well outside the UFC. Rob Wilkinson won an actual season as a light heavyweight for PFL. I believe it was 2022 or and Phil Davis won a belt over at Bellator, and now they're both fighting here in this world tournament. They're in the quarterfinal stage. So 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2 on Thursday. And of course, the UFC is on Saturday. So yeah. And then here's one last question I got from the chat that I just wanted to run it by you guys. Let's see here. Sorry. It says, Sean O'Malley, this is a comment from PR5000. He says, Sean O'Malley deserves the title at bantamweight more than Justin Gaethje at lightweight. I know it's out of nowhere, but it was interesting to me. Do you guys agree with that?
No.
Gun in my head, yeah, I'd say, sure, why not?
Wait, you're saying that
because Sean O'Malley, I see him as a guy that only had one title defense, and the guy against the guy that wasn't the number one contender in Vera.
Wait, you're saying
he eventually lost, but then he got steamrolled. Now he's saying over Gaethje, who again is also he's fighting Arman Sarukian, Charles Oliveira, Ilia Topuria coming up to 55. So both kind of in a way are undeserving, but who's more undeserving or undeserving or whatever you want to call it, less deserving?
Well, I think
I'd say
no.
I'll side with O'Malley just because for less blemishes on his record and less swings at bat for the title.
Nolan, what are your thoughts? You're giggling over there. You
No, I just was watching everybody's expression when this got asked. It was like that GIF with the lady with the math going across with like the diagrams going. I think that I guess at this point in time, just the way that O'Malley got like kind of wiped last time, I think Gaethje's earned it more, but I also think this question's a little interpretive. So I would say that I think Gaethje's earned it a little bit more than O'Malley has at this point.
I agree with Nolan.
All right, guys, excellent job as always. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. If you guys can share it, DM it, retweet it, retruth it, whatever, we would appreciate it. Hitting the like button on the way out, again, means a lot. Subscribe to the channel. It is filled with talent. And don't forget to check out Overreaction Time tomorrow at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio will be the guest panelist with host Simon Samano. Until then, we will see you next week, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, every Monday live here on the channel. Go out and be a champion.